Welcome to a world where family secrets refuse to stay hidden, where pride, envy, and betrayal collide behind polished smiles. Here, every story exposes the raw truths that lie beneath the surface. Homes that symbolize more than success, husbands whose secrets shake the foundation of trust, and loyalties measured in appearances rather than love. Watch closely as quiet rivalries ignite into silent wars, as truths become sharper than any insult, and as power shifts the moment illusions crumble. These aren't just stories, they're real emotions, unspoken grudges, and shocking revelations that change everything. Each episode uncovers the moments where love is conditional, where wealth and status tests loyalty, and where the masks everyone wears finally slip, rewriting relationships forever. If you're ready for family drama that keeps you on the edge, you've come to the right place. Mom's words came with a casual smile, the kind that hid more than it revealed. Your sister really outdid herself this time. That house is just perfect. The room hummed with polite approval, but beneath the surface, the air thickened with something sharper: pride, envy, long buried resentment that had been simmering quietly for years. It was the kind of remark that seemed innocent, almost congratulatory, but it landed like a spark in a dry forest. The husband's laugh followed, too bright, too loud, as if trying to drown out the tension. Everyone nodded along, pretending the conversation was light, but each glance exchanged carried a secret weight. Comparisons, subtle at first, had always been part of family life. Who was smarter, prettier, more successful? But this time, it wasn't just comparisons. It was a quiet declaration of assumed superiority, of ownership over what counted as achievement. The sister's smile widened, perfectly composed, the one that always hid doubts. Her words flowed easily, explaining the home's features, the upgrades, the neighborhood perks. Meanwhile, hints of the husband's secrets started slipping through, little cracks in the carefully constructed facade. The family had always admired his stability, his ability to provide, but murmurs of risky investments, hidden debts, and whispered promises began to surface, almost imperceptibly, like shadows at the edge of the conversation. Jealousy and pride collided in a silent war, neither side willing to acknowledge it openly. Every compliment from Mom became a weapon, every nod a battlefield. And in that charged silence, the quiet observer noticed what no one else seemed willing to admit. The house, the bragging, the perfect image, it wasn't the whole truth. Behind closed doors, the husband's secrets had quietly eroded the sister's illusion of perfection. As the laughter faded and the conversation moved on, an unspoken reckoning lingered in the room. The calm, the polite smiles, the measured words, they all masked a deeper reality. Some victories didn't need announcements. Some truths only needed to be seen. The room had held its polite, measured air for weeks, each conversation carefully edited, each compliment balanced with just enough admiration to seem genuine. No one shouted, no one accused, but the tension simmered quietly, a storm held behind glass. Everyone assumed everything was fine until a single moment made the truth undeniable. It started with a casual question about the house, something that seemed innocent enough, but answers revealed cracks in the polished story. Financial statements, shared casually under the guise of transparency, began to tell a different story. Investments that had been described as secure were anything but. Savings that were supposed to cover future plans had quietly evaporated. And then, buried in fine print, were the carefully hidden transactions that exposed a husband's manipulation. Debts shifted, profits overstated, a facade of stability that had been meticulously maintained. No yelling came, no harsh words, just the undeniable evidence, the numbers and documents speaking louder than any accusation ever could. Eyes widened, smiles froze. Every carefully constructed image collapsed in an instant, leaving behind raw, unfiltered reality. Pride turned to shock, admiration turned to doubt, and the husband, so confident in his control, suddenly appeared small, exposed under the quiet weight of truth. The family sat in stunned silence, a silence that said more than any argument ever could. For years, trust had been quietly chipped away by lies and half-truths, by the illusion of generosity and competence. Every subtle betrayal, every hidden maneuver now lay bare, impossible to deny or ignore. It was revenge in its purest form, not explosive, not cruel, but sharp, precise, and irreversible. No one needed to raise a voice. No one needed to point fingers. The revelation itself did all the work, showing who had been pretending, who had been scheming, and who had assumed power under false pretenses. The tension that had simmered for so long finally found its release, not in chaos, but in clarity. Some victories don't need applause. Some truths demand only to be seen. Family gatherings had always felt like a carefully staged performance, where love was measured in numbers, addresses, and titles rather than honesty or affection. Compliments were handed out for the right house, the right husband, the right social status. Nothing else seemed to matter. And beneath every smile, every toast, every "I'm so proud of you," the truth often hid in shadows. That night, the conversation slipped toward wealth, as it always did. Eyes lingered on the sisters' new home, the one praised as a symbol of success. Every detail was admired: the marble floors, the designer finishes, the city view balcony. But there was an unspoken question behind each compliment. Who was truly thriving? Then, subtly, the conversation shifted. A quiet display of success entered the room, not flashy, not boastful, but impossible to ignore. A glimpse of something bigger, a reality no one expected. Numbers, addresses, and possessions were no longer just status symbols. They became weapons, revealing truths the family had never faced. The husband's calm demeanor faltered as whispers began. No one wanted to admit it outright, but the cracks in his carefully constructed life had started to show. Hidden debts, unmentioned financial risks, and silent manipulations that had gone unnoticed for years suddenly made sense. He had always maintained an image of stability and generosity, but the reality behind closed doors told a different story. A story of control, of secrets, of betrayals that had quietly undermined trust. Eyes that had once smiled with admiration now searched for truth. Faces that had nodded politely now revealed doubt and disbelief. The unspoken loyalty that bound the family had been conditional all along, tested not by love, but by wealth and appearances. Every decision, every judgment, every compliment had been a silent measure of value, and the truth had upended the balance. In that room, nothing needed to be shouted. The truth carried itself, slicing through facades and exposing the careful calculations behind every gesture. The husband's mask could no longer hide the reality of what had been built on pretense rather than integrity. Some families survive wealth, others survive truth. The moment the proof appeared, the room froze. Success was no longer an assumption whispered in polite admiration. It had been laid bare, undeniable and impossible to ignore. Every carefully maintained hierarchy, every unspoken rule about who held influence, who deserved praise, and who commanded respect shifted in an instant. Silence settled like a weight, thick and deliberate, as eyes traced the evidence that had upended the familiar order. The husband, who had always stood at the center of conversations, projecting competence and control, suddenly seemed smaller. The mask of stability and generosity he had worn so carefully, the smile that had reassured everyone for years, slipped just enough to reveal the cracks underneath. Debts previously hidden, small manipulations quietly executed over time, and promises that had never been kept, all of it now lay exposed. The image of a perfect provider had dissolved, replaced by the stark reality of secrecy and miscalculation. Whispers, so long restrained, began to edge toward clarity. The sister's house, once admired as a triumph, now seemed like a fragile trophy in comparison. The admiration the family had lavished so easily, the polite nods and smiles, became irrelevant in the face of undeniable proof. Loyalty built on appearances could not withstand reality, and the carefully constructed illusions began to crumble. Every glance, every word, every quiet pause in the conversation carried a new meaning. Relationships that had been assumed permanent shifted irrevocably, realigned by the truth that had finally emerged. The balance of power, previously subtle and unchallenged, had swung, and there was no way to reset it. It wasn't loud. There was no shouting and no confrontation, just clarity. Just undeniable proof that exposed what had been hidden for far too long. And in that quiet revelation, the family understood that nothing would ever be the same. Not the dynamics, not the expectations, not the trust. Some masks are meant to slip. Some truths are meant to rewrite everything. Thanks for diving into today's story of secrets, betrayals, and shocking twists. If the tension, revelations, and power shifts kept you hooked, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal what really happens behind closed doors. New episodes drop every week, and you won't want to miss a single secret unraveling. Stay tuned, because in this world, nothing is ever as perfect as it seems.